Hey everyone, hope your day is going well. We checked out some of the classic foods of the 1970s. Well, we're moving on to the next decade and see what they got cooking up in the 1980s. A little bit closer to when I was born in 1987, but still different country in maybe the 90s. Hopefully, there's a video about that. Maybe that's something I will recognize more. But let's see what we have in the 80s here. We got Michael Jackson.
The 1980s was all about big hair, big music, big movies, and big trends. Snacks and foods in the 80s were the same way.
Oh, we got Journey
minus
over
the
here.
hair part. People still enjoyed items from previous decades, but there were some new things. This video will discuss some of the foods that helped shape the 80s. Some of these are still around, and some of them are long gone. There are very few kids who don't like pudding, but there is actually something better than plain pudding: frozen pudding.
Huh.
Companies had recipes on how you can make pudding pops way back in the 60s. However,
90
it wasn't
calories,
until
hey.
1979 when General Foods decided to give it a try themselves. They released Jell-O pudding pops, and thanks to a famous spokesman named Bill Cosby, they really took off in the 1980s. They came in chocolate, vanilla, and
The pudding, putting him in jail, yeah? Jeez. Yeah, well, I guess those aren't around anymore.
chocolate and vanilla swirl. These delicious popsicles remained popular until they were discontinued in the 1990s.
Oh,
Somehow,
they
they just weren't making a profit off of these tasty treats.
Were they any good?
One of the 80s coolest
Oh.
snack bars was the Peanut Butter Bopper, which came out in 1985 by General Mills.
I would try that.
Originally, they were available in fudge chip, honey crisp, peanut butter, and by 1986, they added fudge graham and cookie crunch to the lineup. The bars had a soft, creamy center made of real peanut butter that would melt in your mouth. The outside was where all the crunchy flavors were at. Within 90 days of their release, they captured 9% of the snack market. Sadly,
Wow.
these are no longer available in the grocery stores.
Why not?
If you were a cookie lover in the 80s, then there's a good chance you tried the Keebler Magic Middles. Kids everywhere seem to have them in their lunch boxes. These were shortbread cookies with either fudge or peanut butter filling in the center.
Damn.
Despite their popularity, they were discontinued so they could use the equipment that manufactured them for another item. People have been wanting these to relaunch for years, and there's even a Facebook page that's dedicated to make it happen. However, these cookies are still missing in action.
Damn, that's a shame for the people who want it back. They kind of look good, though. They kind of look good. Are they soft? Yeah. I don't really know what shortbread is. Yeah. Oh, you know, the peanut butter really hasn't. It's starting to seep in a little bit more in Belgium. I think in the Netherlands, peanut butter is much more popular than it was here now because we get in some chains, some grocery stores from the Netherlands now in Belgium, and they have a lot more peanut butter options. We didn't have Reese's here until like maybe 5 or 10 years ago. I knew about them and I ordered them online sometimes, you know, but I had to pay huge, like import costs and stuff. That's a hot topic. Yeah, but I always wanted to try them. They were so good. And I tried them abroad and stuff. Reese's, yeah. Now they're starting to have them here in stores only like a few years ago.
The 1980s saw a full-blown war going on with sodas. Coca-Cola is one of the most successful soda companies in the
The
world.
real thing.
The brand is recognized almost all over the world, but in the
That's
1980s, the company experimented with some new products. Coca-Cola already had a Diet Cola named Tab, which was popular, but in 1982, they came out
Tab?
with Diet Coke. This contained artificial sweeteners instead of sugar, and it took over the market by storm. A year
Yeah.
later, they came out with caffeine-free Diet Coke, and this was also highly successful.
They stripped away all the good stuff. No sugar, no caffeine. I do drink zero as well, so no calories, no problem. We'll worry about the cancer later. Yeah. Tab, I never knew about that one. And Diet Coke, we never had Diet Coke here. We in Belgium it was called Coca-Cola Light, which wasn't really like 1 calorie. It was like maybe half the calories. I don't know. And then of course zero came into play. but it was never called Diet Coke here.
With the success of the Diet Cokes, they began to wonder if they could improve the original formula. Coca-Cola had been losing sales to diet drinks as well as other non-cola beverages. Pepsi was also
Lionel
coming on
Richie.
strong in the 80s with some brilliant advertising. Then came the blind taste test, which showed that the public preferred Pepsi over Coca-Cola.
Hey, I like
So
Pepsi
Coke went
too.
to work and came out with a new formula, and they called it New Coke. It launched on
I
April 23rd,
heard about this.
1985,
People weren't
and
happy,
made
right?
big news. Initially, the sales were good, but then quickly sales went back down to the way they were, and the public demanded the classic formula be brought back. Manny said the
I
new
heard about
Coke
this.
tasted like Pepsi, and even Pepsi ran ads with people saying, "I know why Coke did it now." On July 11th, 1985, Coca-Cola executives announced the return of the original formula. The Netflix
Yeah,
show
and then they announced like the old Coke is back, like so proud, like yeah, why you shouldn't have screwed it up in the first place? Then they're gonna come with this, yeah, we this was our plan all along type of attitude. They can never admit an L, when they have it. Take it and wear it proudly.
Stranger Things, which takes
You're
place
still
in the
making
80s,
billions.
featured New Coke, and it brought it back for a little bit, but it has since faded away into soda history.
Man, now I wish I could have tried
Keeping
it.
with sodas, there were also a couple others worth mentioning. Hubba Bubba Bubblegum decided to get in on the soda game for a while, and then another soda
Bubblegum
came
drink.
in on the
Ugh.
action and did quite well. Jolt
What's
Cola
this?
came out with decent popularity. Most thought it tasted like an RC Cola, but it had much more caffeine. Eventually,
Look at this guy. He just put his tongue into an electrical socket or something. Yeah. Oh, Dad had the Jolt Cola again. Hey, I remember Virgin Cola. Does that still exist? Wasn't that Richard Branson? Like he did something like that. I remember seeing that in stores.
the popularity of these
gone,
two
huh?
sodas faded, but occasionally you can still find a Jolt Cola.
Twice the caffeine. Oh man.
Soda
Woo!
companies were also trying their hand in the gum market, and they did fairly well for a while.
Dr.
Dr. Pepper might have been the most
I never
popular, but you could
enjoyed
also
Dr.
find
Pepper.
others like RC
7-Up?
and 7-Up.
Really? Never knew about that.
Hershey Bar None was a chocolate bar that was released
Bar
in
None.
California in
That's a title.
1986, and it went nationwide in 1987. The original formula was a cocoa wafer, chocolate filling, peanuts, and a milk chocolate coating. In 1992, the product was reformulated into 2 wafers with chocolate coating, peanuts, and caramel. It was discontinued in 1997 with little fanfare, but you can still find it sold in Mexico.
Whoa. Bar None.
Do you
That's
remember
actually a
potato
great title.
skins made by Keebler? They were released in the
No.
mid-'80s, and they were made from potato peels. Eventually, they added cheddar cheese and bacon, sour cream and chives, and barbecue by the later part of the 80s. These snacks by Keebler are long gone, but there are some similar ones made by a restaurant chain named TGIF.
I know about that. Never had them though.
The 1980s saw some products that were completely different, and fruit roll-ups were definitely one of those. They were made by Fruit Corners and can still be found in supermarkets today. But the company also had another product they introduced in 1986 called Fruit Wrinkles. These
Fruit
were pieces of
Wrinkles,
wrinkled
that-
fruit
no.
that came in little packages.
I
Sort of
can't.
rode in on the coattails of the popular California raisins that were all over the place in the mid-1980s.
Oh no, I was never into raisins and stuff. Like it's like Theo Vaughn said, raisins are just like grapes who went through a hard time. No, I can't do it.
Kids everywhere were singing the song, wearing the shirts, and collecting the figures, as well as various other types of
Come
merchandise.
on, man. What is this?
Were you a fan of Hostess pudding pies? These came in
Huh?
chocolate and vanilla and were quite popular for a while because they were so different. They
Wow.
have been discontinued by Hostess, but there are some other lesser-known bakery brands that still make them.
Pudding pie.
Bonkers was a popular candy that was introduced in the mid-1980s by Nabisco. If you remember the commercials, they featured people who would have giant fruit fall and bonk them on the head. They came in assorted fruit flavors as well as chocolate. They seemed sort of like a piece of gum, but it was actually a chewy piece of candy.
Oh yeah.
The product is no longer sold, but there have been constant rumors of its comeback.
Is it like Frutella type of thing? Do you know? Where is Frutella from? What country is that from? I don't know.
In 1983, Cheetos released a new flavor of their popular snack. It was bacon flavored and it was released in the Crunchy and the Puffs. They are no longer on the market, but Chester does have bacon cheddar fries in case you get the craving. Nabisco seemed like they were always coming out with something new, and in the 80s they had Swiss cheese crackers.
Hey.
These had holes like a real piece of Swiss cheese, but the flavor didn't quite match up with the cheese.
Aw, that's a shame.
They were
'cause I
still
would love
cheesy,
that.
crisp, and delicious though.
Oh,
They
they're
have been
good.
discontinued, but occasionally you'll see some other brands that have something similar. In 1984, PepsiCo introduced Slice, which was a soft drink made with real fruit
It looks like
juice.
Sprite.
Well, a small percentage of fruit juice anyways. This sweet
10%.
fizzy drink was a big success, but the product disappeared from the shelves in 2005. A company named New Slice Ventures LLC acquired the rights, so you may still see some of these in Canada and the US.
Never heard of it, man.
In the mid-80s, Keebler came out with Tribbles, which was a little bite-sized cookies in a little package. They came in chocolate chip and mint chocolate and were often found in vending machines. By the turn of the 90s, they had completely disappeared.
There's
If you
just so
lived
much
in the 80s, then
competition,
I'm sure
man.
you
It's
couldn't
hard
escape
to.
the burger war that was going on. This war had been going on since the 50s when Burger King released their Whopper sandwich. But Wendy's came on strong.
That's insane, right? Just you got to think like where I live. I remember going to the first McDonald's. So I was born in '87. So if I remember that, I must have been like 5 or 6 years old. So maybe 92, 93, the town where I live had our first McDonald's, and it's been going on since the '50s. So it took a while. Maybe in bigger cities in Belgium, Antwerp, Brussels, maybe they had them already. But this was entirely new for us. It's like, what is this? What's happening?
With a line of commercials.
And
that
we just
used the
got our
slogan,
first Burger King like 2 years ago, something like that. 3 years ago. So took even longer for that.
"Where's the beef?" McDonald's was still trying to crush out the competition. In 1984, they released the McDLT. It came in a unique styrofoam package that kept one side hot and the other side cool. The bottom bun had the meat on one side, and the other side had the top bun, lettuce, tomato, cheese, pickles, and
Oh,
sauces.
really?
The consumer
No,
would then
wow.
combine the two for a fresher taste. This burger became really popular, but McDonald's discontinued it in late 1990 because of the styrofoam packaging.
Yeah.
The 80s also
Oh,
saw its share of cereals
Mr.
that
T.
were connected with movies or shows. Remember C-3POs by
C-3POs.
Kellogg's? It was launched
That's
in
a collectible
1984,
item
about a
there.
year after the movie Return of the Jedi came out. Rainbow Bright had her own cereal, and it was made by Ralston.
That
Both
color,
cereal
man.
created Smurf Berry Crunch, which was
Smurfs. Come on. That's a Belgian invention there. The Smurfs is from Belgium. We got to shout that out. Smurfs. I used to watch it all the time. Smurfs, man.
a fruity red and blue cereal that came out in 1983. A few years later, Smurf Magic Berries made their debut with mini marshmallows. Even Nintendo got in on the cereal
Hey, that's
market in the
cool.
late 80s with their 2-in-1 Super Mario Brothers and Zelda-themed
I
cereal.
missed out on that. Hey.
Keeping on the topic of cereals, you may remember Dinky Donuts cereal, which was released in 1980 by Ralston Purina. The commercials featured kids in suits and business attire who acted like executives giving expert opinions on the cereal.
Why does this sound familiar? I've never seen these, but Dinky Donuts? Was this in Seinfeld or something? Dinky Donuts. I don't know. I can't. For some reason, it sounds familiar.
In the early 80s, Kellogg's came out with banana frosted flakes, which were sweet, but it never quite
Ugh.
caught on, and it only lasted on the shelves for about 3
No,
years.
man, no.
But the 80s did see some successful cereals released. General Mills introduced Cinnamon Toast Crunch in 1984, and America has been eating this
never
crunchy
had
cereal
those.
ever
Those-
since.
I would want to try that. I would want to try. I
Not
like
only
cinnamon.
did Tops make the bubble gum in your baseball cards or Garbage Pail Kids cards, but they also made the gum that came in the little juice cartons. There was no kid in the 80s that could resist these. They came
Gum
in
and
different
juice
flavors
cartons.
like grape,
That's
orange,
cool.
and apple. The flavor was incredible for about 30 seconds, and then you would have to chow on more until you had the whole carton gone in about 2 minutes.
Oh,
It's possible that these little juice cartons can be found somewhere, but it's certainly not as popular with kids today
it's
as
another
it was in the
collectible
early
item
80s.
right there.
Perhaps one of the greatest things in the 1980s was the Oreo Big Stuff. It was a humongous Oreo cookie that was about 10 times the size of a normal one. It was introduced in 1984 and it was sold in a box of 10. It was on the market for about 7 years before it was discontinued. Since that time, Oreo has always experimented with different cookies. Oreo, if you're listening, I think it might be time for a comeback on this big cookie.
I thought they had the big or extra cream, whatever type of thing, But the Oreos, again, here, Belgium, maybe 10 years, but time goes fast. Maybe a little bit over 10 years that we had them, Again, same thing. I knew about them. I tried them abroad and stuff. You always hear about them in films and shows, and I wanted to know what it was. Now we have them. And different types as well, with the chocolate covered and whatever. I like it used as an ingredient. Does that make sense? Like in a shake or in ice cream or something. On their own, they're okay, but I much prefer like a Snickers or something. Or chocolate
During
chip
the 80s, the McDLT wasn't the only experiment McDonald's had. In
the
1981,
McRib.
they released the
That one makes a
McRib, and it
comeback
has been
sometimes,
on and
right?
off the menus ever since. It's
They
not
never have
actually a
it
rib,
here.
but rather processed pork meat covered in barbecue sauce in a bun. People usually get excited when the sandwich returns.
Yeah. I heard about this.
In 1983, McDonald's also released the Chicken McNuggets. These
Oh, they're
deep-fried
classic.
pieces of chicken have been on the menu ever since, and almost every kid has eaten them at one time or another. It's certainly now a classic from the Golden Arches.
The Golden Arches.
Hot Pockets are a microwavable
yeah.
pastry with fillings such as ham and cheese or pepperoni pizza. But do you
Yeah, I never had them. I know about them though. I think, that's the thing you burn your mouth on. Like if it's coming right out of the microwave, you bite it. That's a world of hurt, probably.
remember them hitting the frozen food aisle in 1983? They quickly became the snack food of choice for kids after school, college students, and overworked parents. Most people have probably tried one at some point, and there are many different flavors on the market today.
Well, when I get back to the U.S.
Reese's
one day, I'm
Pieces
going to
were
try a
not
Hot
new in the
Pocket.
1980s. The tiny peanut butter candy pieces made their debut in 1978, but it was the 80s when they really took off. More specifically,
Hey,
it was
E.T.
1982 following the release of the movie
Yeah,
E.T.
yeah.
by Steven Spielberg. Within weeks of its release, sales shot up by 65%. Legend has it that Mars was offered the opportunity with M&M's to be featured in the film first, but they declined the offer.
Ooh.
If that's true, I'm sure they were kicking themselves.
Hey, you better phone home.
Doritos were certainly not new in the 1980s. In fact, they have their roots in the 1960s. But in 1986, Cool Ranch Doritos were released to the public. This new flavor was completely different
Hey, we
than
got Jay
anything else
Leno
on the
here.
market. Even today, these tasty chips still have no problem selling. Giggles were cookies made by
Giggles.
Nabisco, and they were introduced in the 80s, but they were only sold for about a decade. These were shortbread cookies filled with fudge and vanilla cream. In a way, they were like Oreos, but Giggles had silly faces on them that would make you, well, giggle.
Some of them look really weird, though.
The 1980s saw a lot of different food come and go throughout
What?
the decade
Oh,
and even
jeez.
after.
What was that?
But many of the different foods are here to stay, and they are just
Ugh.
as popular now as they were back then. I hope you enjoyed this little walk down memory lane as we
Hey, this
took
is
a closer
fun,
look
man.
at
This
some of the
is fun.
foods from the 1980s. Thank you so much for watching.
I love watching these, even though, 90% of this stuff I don't even know. It's just fun to learn about. Like when I travel, like going into a grocery store, like a gas station, and just seeing the stuff on the shelves. I love that kind of stuff. I love like, oh, what do they got here? So I love that. And definitely need to try a Hot Pocket whenever I ever get back to US and travel and drive a little bit, maybe hit a gas station. Can you just microwave them right there? And what's your favorite type of Hot Pocket? Let me know. So I'm going to write that down, and hopefully one day we'll get to enjoy it on the side of the road. Thank you for being here. Peace.